People on Zoom, thank you. People on Zoom, can you hear me? Thumbs up. Oh, thank you. All right, thanks for confirming. Let me just make sure I have my stuff. Hey. Hi, everyone. Great seeing you all here at the Adler for our March ChicagoRuby Meetup. My name is Michelle Ewan, and I work here. Yeah. I also help organize ChicagoRuby events. One right here. Hello, welcome. Okay, oops. Before we get started, I'd like to give a big shout out to our supporters who have lent ChicagoRuby a hand. First, I'm excited to share that today's meetup is supported by Ruby Central in collaboration with Fastly. Oop. Okay. Ruby Central is a nonprofit organization that many of us are probably familiar with. Thank you. They've been a driving force in the Ruby and Rails communities since 2001, organizing major events like RubyCon and RailsCon, and bringing people together to collaborate, learn, and innovate. Additionally, Ruby Central's open source program is responsible for maintaining essential tools like Ruby Gems and Bundler, which are critical to our daily work. All right. One of Ruby Central's newest initiatives is a grant program to support local meetups like this one, thanks to generous sponsors like Fastly. We're grateful for Ruby Central support. To learn more about their work, visit rubycentral.org or scan the QR code right here. Okay. We'd also like to give a big thank you to the Adler Planetarium for allowing us to use their space today. Okay. You're probably wondering, wait, what does a planetarium have to do with Ruby and Rails or Rails? One of Adler's biggest initiatives and efforts is supporting its citizen science platform, Zooniverse.org, whose backbone is built in Rails. The Zooniverse is the world's largest platform for people-powered research, also known as citizen science. We enable volunteers from around the world to participate in real research projects in multiple disciplines, from astronomy, biology, to the arts and humanities. We have over 2.5 million registered volunteers and around 5 million classifications coming in every week. After today's event, I invite you to explore the museum, especially the Science Visualization Lab, where one of Zooniverse's biggest projects, Galaxy Zoo, a tabletop galaxy-shaped classifier, is housed. Or check out zooniverse.org at home when you get home. I have a quick 1-minute video to learn more about Adler Zooniverse.
Zooniverse is the largest platform for online citizen science in the world.
Zooniverse is a platform for people-powered research, and more importantly, I think it's an opportunity to be part of something bigger.
It's a program that allows researchers from all over the world to put their project up on the internet and let anyone from all around the world analyze the data.
Today, researchers are sitting on huge data sets, and they really need the public's help in processing that data, unlocking that data so that we can pursue the research questions of interest. A core piece of Adler's mission is finding ways to engage the public in science in real and meaningful ways. And so it's hearing about the discoveries, but then being able to go to zooniverse.org and participate in the projects and help those researchers unlock their data and discover exotic, strange, and fun new things.
Hopefully everyone heard that in the back. I did not test the speakers. Okay, cool. All right. Last thing before our main event, aka our wonderful speakers, Ifat and Noel. I invite you all to join our future events We'll post events through meetup.com, the Meetup USA Midwest channel within the Ruby Central Community Slack, and the Ruby channel within Chicago Tech Slack, as well as other avenues, probably social media. So feel free to spread the word to your friends and colleagues as well. All right, that's enough of talking from me. I'm gonna invite Ifat onto, I guess the podium. Yeah. Right.
Can people hear me on the Zoom now? Okay, I assume so.
Someone left their coffee on.
Okay. Okay. We're ready. I'll stand up first, but we'll have to sit afterwards. All right. We did it. Hardest part is over, connecting to the desktop. All right. Hi everyone. Yeah, thanks again for coming to the ChicagoRuby Meetup talk. Thank you, Adler. Thank you, Michelle. Really excited to be here at Adler specifically and excited to talk with you all today. My talk today is called Build or Buy. Not a novel topic, but right, the age-old question of when you should roll your own or let someone else do it for you. So let's get into it. If I remember how to move the screens. All right, so usually this topic is about whether to build something yourself or literally go buy it, right? Like a SaaS product, or you can buy a house that's already built, or this question comes up a lot. But in our line of work, and particularly the Ruby community, we have sort of an intermediary one, right? We've got gems. And using a gem, while free in a lot of cases, as they are open source, this is a version of buying, right? Someone else has already written that code, and some more decision points might come up when deciding whether to use that or not. The really great thing about the Ruby and Rails community is there's a gem for just about everything. Need to authenticate users? There's a gem for that. Need to integrate with APIs? There's a gem for that. Need to stuff your app with fake data? There's a gem for that. That's me. Also, rest in peace, Michelle. Need to calculate business days? There is an app for that, and we did need to use it. It came in handy big time. Need to permit and transform params? There's an app for that. Shameless plug, Launchpad. I try to bring this up in all of my talks, so working so far. Need to build a full-fledged web app with Ruby? There's an app for that. So there's a lot of background, but a little bit about me. There's a developer for this. My name's Ifat Ribon. I'm a developer at Launchpad Lab, hence the plug for one of our gems, Decanter. I like running. Also, the trivia queen at Tapster. I'm there almost every week, and I've won more times than anyone else there. Can't verify it for sure, but I'm pretty sure, just going on anecdotal evidence of me being there and winning constantly. Again, really, really happy to be here. Love Adler, love everything that I have to offer here on the museum campus, and excited to work with you all. All right, going too fast. So basically, wanted to talk to you about, building or buying or buying. We talked about gems, just to level set with everyone. That's actually 3 things you need to consider: whether you build it yourself, whether you go use a gem for that, or you go buy a product. So wanted to introduce sort of a decision framework for that. This is, you'll see a lot of content around out here. This is sort of like the decision framework I've kind of leaned on and use every day at work, whether I'm a developer and I'm assigned a task and I want to think about whether I want to build that or I want to go explore some gems, or whether I'm talking to new clients on the sales team and, kind of hearing all their features that they need at once and recommending, helping them understand, how much they should actually sort of outsource to us to help them build, versus whether there's some existing products that might actually solve their use case. My voice doesn't carry very well. So a bit of a decision framework here. We're going to go through each of these 5 kind of aspects and factors. You'll see as I talk through them that they kind of, there's a lot of overlap, and some of these things might be pretty familiar to you, or maybe there's some things that you haven't thought about. So definitely gonna have time at the end to hear a little bit more from you all on the way you think about this decision point. The first one here is time to market and level of effort, right? Time to market, if you're building a product, or just the time that it takes you to build something, as well as level of effort, maybe cognitively. Something might not take that long to code, but it could take a lot of time to think about. So if you're thinking about your 3 options, if you're building something, it requires a lot of planning. You have to actually write the code. You definitely have to write tests. Everyone here writes tests all the time for everything that they write every time. And then you're going to do it all again, right? Your tests are going to fail, whether it's TDD or not. You're going to change your mind. You want to rename this, you want to rename that. And then you might be on a project team, and then you got to do that with other people. You got to have a code review. They have feedback for you. You're going to try to fix it, and then you're going to break something else, and it goes on and on and on. There's a lot of steps when you're building something yourself. And that goes for working solo as well. So why not check out whether there's a gem for that? I have to admit, when I was a bit newer to being a developer, I honestly thought I had to like build everything myself or just use examples from my teammates that I saw at work. And it took me a while to get in the habit of being like, is there a gem for that? So good skill to have. Definitely encourage everyone to figure out if someone already did it for you. Good news is I've started doing that because I'm a very lazy developer, and that helps a lot to really fulfill that value that I'm trying to align with. So if you're checking out whether there's a gem, the great thing about gems is that they're designed to be easy to use. People want you to use their gems. Oftentimes people build gems to solve a common problem, and they want the most people to use it, right? So they're often easy to install. A lot of times you just, add it to your gem file, bundle, install. Some of them might have a couple of extra steps, and they'll definitely do a good job every single time in their README about how to do that. But generally speaking, you can rely on gems to have sort of an easy to use DSL or interface. You can usually trust them to be pretty battle tested, certainly with automated tests, as well as with the community, right? The community is going to post issues or provide feedback if things aren't working. Well-maintained gems are going to be pretty reliable. So it's great if you have something that you don't want to build and someone already solved that, like business time. Could you write the logic for how to calculate business time? Sure. But why do it when someone wrote business time? Or you could check out if there's a SaaS product. And this could be for a variety of reasons, depending on the nature of the feature or the feature sets that you're working with. You could totally offload that to a whole product team that has, that's all they're invested in, right? That's all they're focused on. Usually also very reliable in terms of reliability, in terms of, probably not a lot of bugs, probably maintaining security pretty well. But as you can see, kind of moving down this road, you're going to incur like additional dependencies. You're going to start relying on someone else, which is going to be a theme of all the aspects. But I would say you can think of this as sort of the most time to the least time, right? Ideally, is the way that it would work. So you want to think about the time that you have or need, as well as the level of effort to build this feature. The next sort of decision point to think about would be complexity and prevalence of the thing that you're building. Some heuristics that I've kind of come up with, more or less, is that if this problem set is unique and very complex, there's probably not going to be a solution out there. I'm probably going to have to build it myself, which is totally fine. I'm going to nail it every time. But that's going to incur all the time and level of effort that we talked about. I've also seen, this kind of the biggest thing that stood out to me is I've kind of seen more examples is it could be something that is really common and simple, but why reach out for another dependency, right? You could probably just build it yourself. So it's sort of two kind of extremes that you might think about that might actually be a good reason why you should build something yourself, even if a gem exists, even if a product exists. The sort of middle point there, as you might expect, if something's pretty common but complex, and someone's written a gem, might be a really great use case. Security is a really good, security and authentication, really good example, right? Authentication is something that every app needs, but it's also very complex. There's a lot that could go wrong there. Lucky for us, we've got a lot of people that have already solved that problem, and they have the backing of the community and people that are invested in making sure that's working, like Devise. So common complex problems, the community is usually trying to solve that, collaboratively. Or you could totally, again, offload it. This works when it's something very complex, but maybe very unique in terms of it might not be often used, but someone invested a lot of time in it. It might be cheaper to just offload that completely. Other examples could be, something like a CRM, right? Salesforce is a really common product. Could you build a CRM yourself, or could you build the elements of a CRM? Sure, but then you wouldn't get all the backings of, being able to extend that and customize that as your needs for CRM get more complex over time. So next one here is flexibility and customization. Sort of kind of in tandem with that. Obviously, when you're building something, you own the whole thing, soup to nuts, for better or worse, and all the things you might introduce, but you get to change it. You get to design it perfectly so that you can extend it just the way you need to. You can tweak every little aspect of it, and there's a lot of value there. With gems, because they are trying to solve a use case for a lot of people, they tend to rely on abstractions, which can be nice. But those abstractions are going to be opinionated. That author thought about how they wanted to solve the problem. Some gems do a nice job of providing you options for configurations and things like that. But you might end up finding yourself sort of working against the gem a little bit. Active admin is kind of a good example of this. I love active admin, really great. You drop it in and you get to see your resources on a page. It's amazing. Very little code, super easy. The minute you want to do something specific, it is nearly impossible. You want to write a custom filter, you want to, switch up the exports, all these things. I mean, you can go down a rabbit hole very quickly. So you kind of get locked into that, right? Into how the author thinks that gem should work. You kind of go down the other end with, offloading a product, probably going to be very opinionated, right? They're going to have very well organized, Scrum teams really hammering out features just the way they want to. But you may be offered, they may sort of work in a way that is offering customization and bespoke work as a service. Salesforce is also a good example of this, right? In the ways that they've kind of opened up their system so that you can customize it, but it is a product you're buying. Or, sometimes when you have sort of outsourced that work, we've worked with a lot of clients who have sort of an external vendor provided software, and they tell me all the time how their developers just kind of build what they want. I was like, that's pretty cool. So you could have the option to basically just buy a product that comes with a dev team as well. All right, so maintenance and longevity. You guys have probably seen a lot of themes here. When you build it yourself, you get complete ownership of the code, which includes all of the bugs, all of the security problems, everything that comes with it, with the trade-off of being able to extend it and make it how you like. The good thing is you get to own it, so you're only depending on yourself to maintain that project. If you want to go with like a gem, like we talked about, gems, they're often battle tested. There's, a lot of like concerns around like security vulnerabilities and things like that. So chances are good that they're going to release updates for those things. However, projects do get abandoned. People run out of time or don't want to work on it. And that could be, you'd kind of have to scramble to figure something out for that, right? You'd either have to rebuild it, or one nice thing about gems and them being open source is you can always fork them and just kind of do a hybrid, sort of build your own and work with the gem. You can extend it that way. Of course, much similar fashion of the product, probably going to be really reliable in terms of that maintenance and longevity, but businesses fall through as well and things like that, or they may take their product in a totally different direction and you're kind of ending up in the same spot. So all those things you kind of need to evaluate in terms of against all the other factors we talked about. And for the last sort of decision point would be the actual value proposition and or competitive advantage of the feature you're building. If this feature is very critical to your app, and you might be coming up with some IP around it, it could be that someone solved something similar or something like that. But if you build it yourself, you sort of maintain that complete ownership. You maintain that complete ownership, including the IP and all of that, right? And that might really add to the value proposition of your product. You probably wouldn't want to outsource that. If you're using a gem to help with a feature that's not a core part of your app, you still want to make sure that that gem is adding value, not only against all those other factors, but is the gem popular? Is it reputable? Are they being maintained? Are they taking care of all the things that you decided to use a gem for? You can kind of look on GitHub and see how they're doing. You can probably read blog posts about them. And lastly, for buying, I think I meant to change that last one, but if that's not even a part of your product and you just need to offload the work, buying an existing product is probably going to be your best bet. A lot of times, with storage or things like that, you don't need to like rebuild your own servers or things like that. You'd probably use a product to help you out with that. So those are sort of like the 5 kind of decision points that, I kind of think about when I think about whether I want to build something from scratch, whether I want to use a gem for that feature, or, maybe there's actually like a product that would be a better play here. So as I was thinking about this, one of the impetus for doing this talk was that a few years ago, I was working on a project, and again, as maybe like a less experienced developer, I heavily relied on the tools that I knew, and I was tasked with a project that really had 2 simple features: upload a file to an SFTP server, and send an email when that was done, that it succeeded or it didn't succeed. And at the time, I was like, I know Rails. I'm going to use Rails. Rails new, happy as a clam, wrote my couple of services, deployed to Heroku in a snap, and it was great. Over time, something was nagging at me. I was like, I don't really have any views. I'm not really using, like action cable. I don't even have any models in this thing. I don't need Rails. And it's not that ultimately not a huge performance hit, having all those things in my app that I'm not using, but I was incurring all those dependencies we talked about, right? I was relying on Rails to maintain security updates, which it does, thankfully. I was, obfuscating a lot of the work that I might be relying on, whether it was with mailers or other things, making things less discoverable. And it was also just a big app with a lot of things in it when I ultimately needed like 5 files. So I was like, I think I could just write this in Ruby, which having used Rails for so long, I just don't actually get to do that often, is just write a Ruby app. So just step back and I was like, what if I just write a Ruby app? And then I'll see if I want to add gems, or if maybe Rails was actually a really good fit for this. So I'm going to take you through that process, and we're going to focus on mailers, because mailers is the thing I've probably relied the most on for on Rails for ActionMailer, and haven't really done that with just Ruby, with Ruby's SMTP library, but not using sort of like any external tools. So we are going to check that out. I was going to do it fully live, but I don't think I can see this screen very well. So I'm going to have the code up, and then we'll talk through it. Let's make sure that we can see this. All right, I will start here. I cannot see that. Nope. All right, you guys can see the code, okay? Let's get rid of cursor here. Don't need that. All right. Also, I should ask for a time check because I was not paying attention. Okay. All right. Okay. I think we'll have time for all this. So I'm going to walk you through this. I just have this is the full app with all the examples in it. So we're just going to walk through the code, because I don't think I could type from here. But I just have a main.rb. This is just an entry point with some stuff that I was doing earlier to show you fun things on the slides earlier. And a helper method here that we'll use later. I'm going to load all my environment variables that I'm not going to show on the screen or recording through here. And we're also going to do some things with CSVs later, as you can see down here. So the first one I want to start with is just like the pure Ruby example with the libraries that it offers. So for that, we've got just a base class here, and we're setting up all the things that we need. Ruby has its net SMTP library, which is very useful when you're trying to do things with SMTP. And the main sort of aspects of this are, actually being able to like send the email. And here you can instantiate an SMTP instance, and it has some methods on it that you can use. I'm using Gmail, so making sure to enable TLS for the for secure transport. But the rest of it is maybe looks a little pretty straightforward. So it has a start method to start the server. We'll use a block to have it close the server afterwards, and we'll have a send message. They'll take the message that we'll create. That's what I'll pass in. Other than that, we have some variables that just sort of tell it where to go. So we're telling it that it's Gmail, and this should all look familiar even if you've used ActionMailer in your Rails app, because you have to put all this stuff in the application.rb. So we have sort of our dispatching, and then to actually send an email, I'm going to kind of craft a message here where I can give it a subject and a body. This is very simple, right? It's plain text. I'm not doing anything fancy, so I'm very bad at like HTML strings and things like that. So we're going to keep it really simple. All right, so that's pretty much the basics. And then I did this separately. I could have done some conditionals, but I have an option here to send with attachments, which I think is the more interesting part about sending mail. So similar sort of setup. We do have some boundaries to sort of separate, sort of what is the plain text from the attachment text here. We'll encode that text, or sorry, the file contents that I'm going to pass along, and attach that message in a similar fashion. So don't worry too much if, there's a lot of just sort of new things here, but this is just Ruby, right? We're not using any gems. We're using Ruby libraries, but not any gems particularly. And just some other elements here. So we are going to, so then I want to make some specific mailer methods for what I need to do. I wanted a method for the upload succeeded. maybe it failed, and maybe in this file capture here, right, where I'll actually pass in the file contents and then I'll send that along. You can see here, just plain text body, just send it in and it will dispatch that message. So I am going to send this. Let's make sure it works. If I can figure out where all my things are. Oh. Let's make sure everything's bundle installed because that's helpful for this. This is why I don't do live coding. Uh-oh. All right, that is not going to work. I changed a lot of stuff right before I came here. So we're just going to talk through it and you're gonna have to trust that these mails send. I have a bunch in my trash from earlier today on Gmail. All right, so I think this is was actually pretty straightforward and pretty easy. ChatGPT helped me a little bit, making sure all the syntax was right. So let's move on to using ActionMailer. I just renamed this folder because I didn't want any conflicts, but for ActionMailer, you can just add the standalone gem. This is what I love about Rails. Everything's sort of like decoupled, right? When you just add Rails, you can even specify within your application.rb whether what you want, what you don't want with your Rails size. You can also use everything individually, which I think is really nice. So for that, as far as a sort of a base class here, these are the settings you probably know and love. I'm going to tell it to just look into the same folder because usually in your Rails app, it kind of auto detects that you have like a mailers folder and it's going to look in there. I just want it to look in this current folder. And I've got the site mailer, same idea here, pretty similar methods. Sending a lot of the same stuff, right? The subject, just again, telling it what template to look at that we have here. And we'll use ActionMailer's mail method that it provides, and I'm calling deliver straight on here. So this mail method will just provide like an instance of a mail object, and then you can do a lot of things with that, which is cool. But the thing that I most want to do is deliver the mail. So I'm going to deliver the mail. Sometimes you'll see people, put the deliver after the method that they want to use. It's all design choices on your own. But we've got kind of all the same things, except for I also get to use instance variables here instead of interpolating it into my body of the file. So I get to do some slightly more interesting things. I can actually use HTML because it's a lot easier for me in an HTML file than it is in a doc string. So we'll interpolate those variables through in a little image, which I now can't show you because I can't run this app. But you can see that same idea. This probably is the more familiar aspect. I think what we can sort of point out here, though, is there's actually like quite a bit that's pretty similar to the pure Ruby instance. And ActionMailer's helping us a lot with sort of all of this, and most specifically all of this, right? Like I kind of had to write this by hand, but ActionMailer is just doing that for us all in that mail method, I assume. So that's nice. It was a little shorter. I got to do a little bit less. I could have really put this all in one file. I could have just dropped this right in my site mailer configs and had it be sort of a lot simpler, which is really nice. Cool. So that probably saved me some time. Obviously, you can get way more complex. I think certainly the benefit of using the ERB files, which again, I could probably do and then pipe into the base mailer as an option, but this is a convention that we know and love. The third option I wanted to show, so that would be the gem option, a gem that sort of extracted away all the SMTP mailing work. The last option then would be using a product. One of those products is called MailJet. This product lets you sort of design the template sort of like right in the UI, which is really nice. This is a really great use case if you have different teams working on this, right? We worked with a client who, had a marketing team and they were going to be responsible for designing the emails. It would be pretty rough if they had to keep telling us to update these HTML files, right? So it's a really nice tool. And then they offer an API and then they offer a gem to work with that API. So you get bonus round on this one. We're using a gem and a product. But the idea here with MailJet, we've got a bit of a setup here where we'll require the gem up here, just really small configurations, got the API keys. And then we can do all sorts of stuff with what it returns with its API. But ultimately, With the gem offers this MailJet send with the create method. One thing I want to point out is, I mentioned that I had renamed this Ruby ActionMailer because I didn't want to collide, or I wanted to be more clear about what my app is responsible for. I was silly and didn't do that for this. And now someone reading this app may not be super clear to them if this is coming from the gem or if this is coming from our app, right? So if you guys have ever seen me do a talk before, I love documentation and good naming, and this is problematic. But I left it so I could do that little sidebar. So we're going to configure it according to the gem. Ultimately, we just need to call create, and there's just sort of some other things that you can help with. And then the attachments, if I have attachments, I can sort of add those in there. A lot of similar things, right? There's still some stuff I have to do myself. I have to work with the API. You'll see that a little bit more specifically here in the site mailer. I have to define, so this is according to their docs, which I have up as well, but I have to define all these things. So it's not that there's no code or something like that. I don't know if that's ever, truly the case with any of these options, but their API is documented, or at least in the gem, they help sort of indicate how you should be doing that. So like I said, great README, which is super helpful, made it easy for me to do this, as well as any AI tool pretty much can spit this out for you, given that that gem is available. You just give it a template ID, and then you can sort of just call your method to send those mailers. With this, MailJet handles all the delivery. I'm not like instantiating SMTP anymore. I'm not working with my ERB files. I've pretty much completely offloaded like 95% of the work now for the mailers, other than anytime the marketing team needs a new mailer, they do need, we need to know what the template ID is and things like that. So again, there's not that there's no code, but you can see how there's different, reasons why you would stick with your base approach, which is the first one I showed. This one was good for me in an app that doesn't use Rails. I could use the ActionMailer one if I needed some more, I wanted to style these HTML a little bit better, and I wanted to actually have some more robust mailers that weren't just plain text. Or if you've got sort of a bigger ecosystem that you're working with, you might have a team that wants to be responsible for the templates. They can change them whenever they want. Great use case for a product, right? You don't want to have to solve something where you're now exposing all these templates in your UI so that they can change it to solve for that. So those were 3 examples. I had some beautiful images for you, but alas, that's what I get for trying to do something live. Yeah, I hope that was kind of helpful in thinking about how you might decide to build something, reach for a gem, or, maybe when a product could come into play and be the right case for you. So with that, keep looking at the wrong place. That's it. That's Q&A. Yeah, thanks for your time. Definitely appreciate you guys having me up here, and happy to answer any questions, thoughts. You just want to shout out your favorite gems that I should have included earlier. Happy to know about that too. So thank you.
What's the worst example of building when you should have just bought? Like what a case where you're like, oh my God, I should have just used this gem.
File importing.
By importing?
Yeah, for pretty simple importing, flat file, great, drop it in, use it. Things can get complex, right? Because flat file, their documentation isn't always up to date. They're changing things, their API and things like that. But there's definitely been some times when we've written importers that we could have used flat file, would have been a good fit. Great question.
How about the opposite? And the opposite of what he asked. When did you buy and you thought, I should have built this?
That's a good question. I almost want to say flat file. Yeah. Oh, that's a good question. Yeah. Or administrate when you could have gone active admin. I don't think about that, but yeah, I mean, I think certainly running into challenges with active admin, or we could have just built a custom portal and that would have probably been a better fit. Or flat file when we run into challenges that we probably could have just written a simple importer for. Any other questions? Fun gems y'all like? Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
double check the chat too.
Oh.
Not sure. Yeah,
Good call.
yeah. I like for that.
What is that? Oh, got it. Oh, sorry, you're repeating the questions that we had. Cool. Nice.
I can, is that better? To unmute myself? There we go. All right. Now I just need to make the presenter. Okay. Hi, everybody. Hello. Hi. Hi. You can all look up here now. Talk amongst yourself. Time is temporarily over. The meeting part of this meetup is suspended, so you have to listen to me. You can meet people and then interrupt it by having to listen to me drone on for 20 minutes or so. It's going to be great. Thank you for coming out here on a beautiful spring day here in Chicago. Does anybody beat me in coming from farther than Deerfield? Deerfield, Illinois. Yes, Deerfield, Illinois. Okay, if you want to speak. What? And I might have come anyways to Adler. How often have an excuse to come to the planetarium, honestly. Yeah, my commute here was 1 hour and 45 minutes. So I'm very excited to be here, and I hope that you enjoy this commensurate with 1 hour and 45 minutes. Could have read this talk 2.5 times. This is all just an excuse for anybody who wants to get this information down. We'll get it. We'll come back to that at the end. So I'm going to start off with a hard question for y'all. Do you love Ruby? Show of hands. Yeah. Okay, I want to tell a little bit of a story here to start. So once upon a time, I bought this as a birthday present for myself. This may give away my age a little bit, but I worked at a company that gave us a book budget, like an explicit book budget, every like $100 a month. So once a month or so, a bunch of my coworkers and I would pile into a car and we would go to this bookstore, Quantum Books, I believe Quantum Books in Cambridge, Massachusetts, that was a technical bookstore that specialized in and basically only sold technical books. And we would all pile up like it was a reality TV show, and we were at Whole Foods for 30 minutes and a budget of $100 on a cooking show, and we would go away with this. And I specifically bought this, the Pickaxe book, Programming Ruby, because I had started to hear about Ruby probably through like extreme programming mailing lists and stuff. I think Dave Thomas was going on about it at the time, something like that. I don't actually remember. But I was really excited about this. And at the time, professionally, I was mostly using Java and Python, which Java was unsatisfying and bland because Java is unsatisfying and bland. Python I liked more, but it was still like I had been a very early object-oriented person in the mid-90s, again, giving away my age a little bit, but I was in a grad student environment where I was actually teaching object-oriented development and using Smalltalk and all of those tools from them. And none of the other languages that were like in use in the quote unquote real world really scratched that itch until I started using Ruby and its status as a pure object-oriented language was like very satisfying to me. And I fell for it. I think many of us, we don't all have the same story here, but I think like you're here at a Ruby meetup. Like that implies that part of this story resonates. You started using this language. It scratched some itch for you. Maybe it just got you a job. Maybe you're just looking for a job here. But something about it really like interacted nicely with your brain. Like you enjoy using it as a tool. And as I came to appreciate Ruby and even later than that, appreciate the Ruby community, came across like the phrase that you'll see a lot, Ruby is designed for developer happiness, which I believe, I guess, kind of. I suppose on some level, all programming languages are designed for developer happiness, except like C++, I guess. But we're going to talk about like, what does that mean? And what do people who love Ruby love about Ruby? Just a quick, like, snap answer. What do you love about Ruby? All of you said you love Ruby. Like, what's one thing? Shut it out. What?
Productivity. If your OCD is great.
Probably I shouldn't have had everybody shut it out. That was on me. I get that. I understand that now.
Productivity.
Productivity, less syntax.
Numerable.
Enumerable. I like that, yeah. I'm gonna explore that. So does Ruby love me back is the sort of clickbaity title of this. And I'm talking about what developer happiness is in Ruby. And I'm gonna talk about it by exploring like 4 of Ruby's like most outlier design decisions. And look at what they are and why they are and what they bring to Ruby and how they get us to productivity or enumerable. Nobody said expressiveness, but that's another one. So, my name is Noel Rappin. I work for Chime Financial. You can catch me online at noelrappin.com, where I somewhat more rarely than I really should post blog posts. And I am also, my most prominent social media presence right now is noelrappin.com. Hi, everybody. Still me. So the first thing I want to talk about here is parentheses. Ruby's outlier opinion about parentheses is you don't need them. They are optional. All parentheses in Ruby are optional unless they actively confuse the parser, with like 1 or 2 minor exceptions that we are not going to talk about here, because we're not talking about minor exceptions here, except later when we talk about a minor exception. Now that I think about it. So we often think of this in our head. I think of this in my head as something like this. Like this is from a gem file. This is gem in a gem file is actually a method call. We've actually left out parentheses here for reasons. By the way, I don't know I didn't quite realize this, but gem files are Prendtler interprets gem files as Ruby. It instance evals a gem file, which means that if you want to parse a gem file to do something else, the fastest way to do it is to implement your own DSL and like implement the same 7 or 8 methods that Blender uses. It's actually quite easy, which was somewhat surprising to me. Anyway, but you can also do this, which I think is kind of a monstrosity, but you can do it. In this case, what I've done here is I have left out this is a method call, method definition, and I've left out parentheses around the method arguments and definition. This is completely legal Ruby. This is sometimes called Seattle style, because the Seattle RB user group fairly early in Ruby's development released a number of gems that got wide use using this style. I think this is hard to read, but you know, I see nods. But it is legal. I will say one of the luckiest things I've gotten to do in my career is I got to work alongside Michael Feathers, who wrote the Working Effectively with Legacy Code book. And I did not teach Michael Feathers Ruby. I was more there when Michael was teaching himself Ruby as kind of his native guide. And Michael thought the syntax was hysterically funny. He loved it. I don't know if he still used it or if it's just something that tickled him for like a week and then he went back and started writing code like a normal person. But he thought this was like the funniest, greatest thing that Ruby let you do this. And I still have no idea why. Anyway, this feature is universally beloved. This is from my company Slack, which is why I've expurgated the person's name. This is why optional parens are the devil, after we had a bug that was caused by optional parens. Don't worry, person on video, it didn't affect anything important at all. Anyway, so the question that always comes up in something like this is like, why is Ruby like this? People ask me this in orientation when I teach Ruby all the time, like, why does this happen? And there actually is a reason why Ruby is like this. And when I say, throughout this talk, when I say there's a reason for this, this is not because I am have interviewed Mats extensively on this stuff. I am extrapolating from public statements and sort of the effectiveness of these syntax decisions and what they allow you to do. But there's a very specific thing that Ruby allows you to do quite easily because of the parentheses, or at least partially because of the parentheses. So regular class definition here, I'm creating an adder reader. So that's name, it's a method, and then I'm using it. And I access the name with user.name. Crucially, this looks like an attribute. Even though it is a method call, it looks like an attribute call because it doesn't really look like a method call. It looks like I'm accessing it. If I go off and make this more complicated, so this is the same class, but now there's a first name and a last name, and now the name calculation is more complicated. It is a calculated parameter, not a parameter. The access is the same. user.name, and it still looks like an attribute. Now, Ruby is not the only language that has sort of this feature. There's a name for this. It's called the Uniform Access Principle. And what that means was coined by Bertram Meyer, or one of the early OO guys. And what this means is that from the outside, the calculated attribute is the same as an uncalculated one. If I make the decision in my internals to change whether this attribute, name, or whatever is calculated or uncalculated, the syntax of none of my callers' syntax changes, right? They don't care. They don't have to care. It's a very important principle in object-oriented design that you should not care about things that you don't need to care about. And this is the way Ruby does it. Ruby is not the only language, obviously, that has this kind of like uniform access. In Java, they would probably both be called getName, and they would look like methods and not like attributes. You can kind of do this in Python. Ruby has like the smoothest glide path toward making these things look like attributes rather than methods. And I think that like affects the way that you think about Ruby. This also works for setters. So same class here, I've now defined the setter, name equals. And I want to focus on that last line here for a second. This looks like a assignment here. I'll show it up. This looks like a, well, what is this?
Syntactic sugar.
It's syntactic sugar on a setter. Yeah. So specifically, like this again looks like a assignment statement, assignment expression, technically. But it's not. I was probably used Ruby for like 3 years before I completely understood that this was not actually an assignment statement. It's a method call. It's specifically just calling the name equals method. And you can kind of trace the syntactic sugar here, where on the top level, you have the fully like parentheses, normal syntax method call where equal sign in parentheses. The second line is also legal Ruby. You have the method name with the equal sign. You've stripped off the parentheses. This looks a little bit weird because it looks asymmetric. And then Ruby does this weird thing where it allows you to put spaces between the method name and the equal sign. And you can think of this either as Ruby ignores white space before an equal sign, or you can think of it that Ruby parses this as an assignment expression and figures out what the method name is. I honestly don't know what Ruby does internally. It occurred to me. And I don't really care. The important part is that this is a thing that looks like an assignment statement to a programmer brain, but is actually internally a method call. Right? And this is actually even weirder than it looks. Normal assignment expressions in Ruby return the value of the new method. The new value. The value on the right side is the return value of the assignment expression if you are using the assignment. The value. That's why you can use an if with a single equals, even though you're not supposed to, because you're doing the assignment and you're getting the new value as the value of the expression. But in Ruby, you could write this equals method to return anything. And so here I have a thing equal and it returns the string banana. And the weird thing is that if you call this as thing equals, the expression will return 5. And if you call it as a regular method, fully parenthesized with the equals without the syntactic sugar, the method will still return 5. Ruby is doing some magic here to treat this as an assignment, even when it is not assignment, even if it doesn't look like assignment. And I can prove that it's doing special magic here, because if you bypass this by using send, Ruby will actually return banana. This is, I submit, like a very aggressive design decision on Ruby's part. It is a lot of work here to make a thing look like something it's not. I don't know. Maybe you love this. Maybe you don't love this. I love this. I think it's great. So working along with that, the second thing in Ruby is the implicit receiver. The implicit receiver here, as shown in this snippet of code that we have already seen. Implicit receiver here in the name method, first name and last name are both method calls to self. The receiver's not there. But they are calling the self receiver. I believe that Ruby is the only like serious object-oriented language that does this. I don't think any of the other ones allow you to do this. I actually think this goes along with Ruby being a pure object-oriented language, since there are no functions that are not methods in Ruby. You don't have to worry about parsing functions that are not methods, so you can do weird things like figure out what an implicit receiver is. But yeah, Ruby implicitly assumes self as the receiver of a method call without a receiver. This probably does make the parser a little bit more complicated. Like it's a deliberate decision. It's another thing that the parser has to think about as it is trying to figure out what to do with Ruby code. So it was not an accident. Like it's a very deliberate decision, which again begs the question of like why? Why is Ruby like this? And in this case, like I don't think it is compactness specific, although it does make Ruby code a little bit more compact. I think it's more like, I think it is a specific desire to allow for method calls that don't look like method calls. If you think about what Ruby was actually designed for originally, it was designed to be a shell scripting language. And one of the things about a lot of Ruby commands without parentheses with the implicit receiver is they look like shell commands. And I think that's on purpose. I think that is designed specifically to make an unfamiliar thing, this object-oriented language, look like this familiar thing, a shell command. So, this is a method call, like this is also an interesting trick to allow things to be global methods because they are stuck in an objective kernel and they are therefore global without doing anything unusual to the syntax or the semantics of the language. It's also kind of a sneaky way to have these commands feel global. In a way, again, that you can use Ruby for a very long time before it even occurs to you to think about where puts is defined. Ask me how I know that. And so, I think, so this is, sort of a comparison here. Top line here is a Rails active record object, the way it is sort of typically written. Second line here is how it is written, how you would write it if you were fully like taking advantage of the parentheses in the self. And like, I think that like the bottom level here has advantages in teaching and in initial understanding of Ruby. But I think once you understand what's going on, the top level is much easier to read, in my opinion. It has less boilerplate. Your eye is focused on the more important, on important things rather than unimportant things. And it is more concise. I can think concise is like a neutral value for code at best. But I think this is more expressive of my intent at the top. Similarly, you can do this with RSpec. I often have people when I'm teaching RSpec rewrite code, RSpec code, the way it looks like on the bottom once or twice, just to see what's going on. But once you understand what's going on, the top line, as you would sort of more typically write RSpec, again, I think is easier to understand. But I think it's important to understand that it's important that it is different, is easier to understand once you already know what's happening. Third thing, and there are only 4 things, so we're not going to be here all night. Third thing is blocks. Blocks are not a unique thing to Ruby, although Ruby's implementation of them is really idiosyncratic. This is legal in Ruby. You can put a block at the end of any method call, and it is tactically legal. It will just get silently ignored. Actually, in Ruby 3.4 or 3.5, there's a warning that it will emit if you have warnings turned on. So it won't get silently ignored. It will get loudly ignored. Perhaps that's better. I don't know. That's kind of the weird part, is it has this weird syntax sugar for this block syntax. It's like a lot of languages have the concept of anonymous functions or anonymous classes. Ruby has this very unusual form of syntactic sugar for that functionality. And it kind of steals it from Smalltalk. Smalltalk also has blocks with very strong literal syntax that are not quite functional objects like Ruby. This is Smalltalk code. The advantage, the distinction here is that in Smalltalk, a block is really a first-class object, so that you can have more than one of them as the argument to the method. So this is, if you're unfamiliar with Smalltalk, I don't know, is this parsable? If you're, I'm assuming that most of you here are like kind of unfamiliar with Smalltalk. What this is doing is you have a Boolean expression that's evaluated first. That becomes the true object or the false object. It evaluates, and then the method is if true, if false, each with a block argument. The true version of that evaluates the true block. The false version of it evaluates the false block. It's actually quite elegant in its own way. But again, these are very, very similar to Ruby blocks that even use pipe characters for local variables. Ruby's blocks give you most of the flexibility, but are somewhat less complex to parse. If you think about what this would be like to parse in Ruby syntax with curly braces, you actually see that it is coming up against the 75 million other things that Ruby uses various bracket syntaxes for. Is it a hash in that case? Is it an array? Is it a whatever? One advantage from Ruby's perspective of having blocks be in a very specific location is the parser can pick them up more easily than if they could be defined anywhere. And the block syntax being the way it is quite expressive in loops. Like this is a very familiar kind of structure for, again, a very complicated piece of functionality. But this is a piece of structure that would be comprehensible, like just in terms of the structure of it, to somebody who is not necessarily familiar with it. And you can use proc objects for the things that don't, where you need that like double block functionality. You can go back and forth fairly easily. Okay, the fourth and last one here is monkey patching, also universally beloved. Never hear a negative word about monkey patching in Ruby. Specifically, what you can do here in Ruby, and again, this is like, depending on how you squint about how Smalltalk works, this is also unique to Ruby. It's unique to Ruby among like text-based languages, as opposed to like image-based languages like Smalltalk. Here I am, I've reopened the string class, I've defined a yell, and now this is globally available to all strings. This feature is uncontroversial. I guess, as I've sort of alluded to, I have taught Ruby for 15 years maybe, and I get the wildest range of reactions when I show people monkey patching in Ruby. I have had people like burst into laughter. I have had people like be kind of puzzled, just sort of like, how does anything ever get done in this? I've had people be delighted by it. I've had people get angry, like really genuinely angry. Like not just like, I don't understand how anything ever gets built in this language, but I don't understand how anything gets built in this language, and you are perpetrating a fraud upon me. I presented to me as this language, this language is something that people can work with. Like, good day, sir. Like real anger. Those are like, I think obviously the people who have the most trouble with this are people who have spent most of their time in very strongly typed languages and in very sort of enterprise focused environments where the very idea that you might be able to like break everything by redefining integer addition, which when I say it out loud like that does sound kind of insane, it is quite like outside that worldview, and it sort of blinds them. It takes some time to get somebody to come to the point where they kind of see where there's value here, and to see that like, yes, we already know that there's a lot of footgun kind of things you can do with this, and we have as a community decided that we're not going to do them. Like it does work, I promise. Why does it exist? I don't really know. I don't know exactly why, but one interesting thing here is to think about like the common alternatives of what other languages do. If you wanted to add like a yell method that was available to all strings, like this top pattern here, you could create a class that has a bunch of class level methods, and you could use those class level methods that all take strings. This is functionally equivalent. This is the most common pattern in Java, not to keep picking on Java, but it's a super common pattern in Java to have classes that are just utility classes of methods. To my eye, this is awkward, and especially awkward because you have to like figure out which utility class defines the method that you're interested in a complicated environment where there might be more than one of them. Another thing that you can do is you could create a subclass of string. Ruby does this in a couple of cases. String inquirer works like this in Rails. It's a subclass of string. And then you can create a special method inside that subclass. Then you kind of need a way to create instances of that subclass. It's like maybe a little bit less awkward, but it is also kind of verbose. Whether it's less awkward or not kind of depends on how comfortable you are with root object oriented stuff. And so like, I think this is kind of a universal access principle. Like the decision here is that if I'm going to have a yell method and it's going to work on strings, I want it to work on all strings. The easiest way to make it work on all strings is to make it part of the string class. And there's a tremendous amount of power in that. Rails gets a ton of its power from its ability to do that. Active support like really is quite valuable. And one of the reasons it is valuable is because it can do this. And if it wasn't able to do this, all the things that we use active support for on a daily basis would be like much more awkward. It would be much more complicated. And I'm pretty sure that, again, I don't know exactly what the thought process was in allowing this. It's a very, very aggressive design choice and that no other language really lets you do it. So it was probably not something done on a whim. But I think that it was this thought. It was this thought of trying to make it from the user of the library. You don't have to know where it's defined or how it's defined. It's just part of the same class. I also think it's interesting to note that like there has been in Ruby, like people who get upset about monkey patches being global, there is a remediation for this in Ruby called refinements that has been in Ruby for over a decade and is used approximately 0 times worldwide every day. It came at some cost. Like it's a very complicated feature. It was a very complicated feature to implement. It took 2 or 3 versions of Ruby to get fully implemented. And basically nobody uses it. Because even the small amount of overhead that it adds to use refinements versus regular monkey patching seems to make the feature less useful. Like there just doesn't seem to be a value proposition there. At least that's my interpretation of it. So what do these 4 things have in common, I think? I think that what they have in common is a certain amount of flexibility that they give you as the developer when you work with Ruby. I definitely think that what they have in common is a certain expressiveness where it gives you, the way that it allows you to use that flexibility is to allow the structure of the code to reflect your intent. Do I want this to be interpreted as a command? Do I want this to be interpreted as an attribute? Do I want this to be interpreted as a method by the person who's reading it? And people who read code bring different expectations to those things. Ruby allows you, especially when you start being able to combine these features into things like domain-specific languages, there's just a tremendous amount of flexibility there. Another thing that I think is a common thread here is that Ruby is an object-oriented language that really, really goes out of its way to not look like an object-oriented language. It really goes out of its way to make some of those object-oriented structures look like procedural function, procedural code, C language kind of structures. And I think an important piece of information here, Ruby, original version of Ruby was released in 1995. Also, the original version of Java was released in 1995. I think we can therefore assume that Java was not a tremendous influence on Matt's as he was creating Ruby. And an important feature of Java in that time period was that it dramatically simplified object-oriented syntax relative to other languages that were around at the time. The other languages that were around at the time, Smalltalk, not super used outside of a couple of industries in academia, very, very purist language, very minimal syntax. You had Python, not quite as purist language, also not really a very strong object-oriented language in 1995, although it has become one since. You had Perl, which is everything to everybody, everything everywhere all at once. The language, which has a ton of syntax, is not completely pure object-oriented language, but you can kind of do it. And then you had C++, which was a total mess syntactically. I don't know if anybody here has ever used C++. It's ridiculously overcomplicated for what it tries to do. And so, like, if I was trying to write a pure object-oriented language in that environment, like, it would be very enticing to me to add a lot of syntactic sugar. Like, you can pick off the people who are like very comfortable with C or very comfortable with that style of language, and might be willing to try a object-oriented language that didn't have crazy syntax like C++ or was a ridiculously purist kind of thing the way Smalltalk was. And I kind of think that had a lot to do with it, I hope anyway. All in sort of the name of making the simple thing easy and the complex thing possible, which is an Alan Kay quote, I think, about Smalltalk. And I think the Ruby community has sort of picked up on this. Like, the Ruby community has historically always been like very concerned with the aesthetics of code in a way that is often interpreted as being kind of like twee almost. but I think is really comes from a sincere concern with being able to write code that where the structure of the code and the aesthetics of the code make the code easier to understand and easier to use. Like Rails is certainly designed with this in mind for a very specific definition of what makes code easier to use. RSpec 2 in its own way, like is designed to be easy to use again for a very specific definition of easy to use, which I guess you could call developer happiness. And I guess that is like to answer the original question, like that the way that Ruby sort of loves us back, and as corny as that phrase sounds in my ear, it sounded much snappier as a title when I figured it out. It enables us to express what we are doing and communicate what we are doing. And at the end of the day, what we're doing with respect to the other programmers in our community is communication. Ruby is designed to facilitate that. So that's what I've got. I hope that was good. I am Noel Rappin. I am the co-author of this book, which you can get from Prog as an ebook. You can get it from Amazon as a physical book. And again, you can go to noelrappin.com and see various and sundry blog posts, mostly, but not entirely about Ruby, and who knows what all. Thank you again for coming out on this night. I really appreciate it. Appreciate seeing these things, these meetups thrive. And thank you.